Hello, I am Mr. Schult. All of you seniors know me well. Those of you on the left half and the back half, hopefully you would know me well in the future. I'd like to start out by saying thank you. I was homeschooled K through 12, and then I went to a private school, and quite frankly, it was a little intimidating coming in and teaching high school. The first time I'd ever been in a high school classroom, was the first time I taught a high school class. And the faculty and staff here have been amazing and kind and generous and patient with me. All the students, your kindness towards each other has encouraged me and given me hope that this is a place where people can come and learn and change. But in particular, I'd like to thank my seniors. You all have been, I'm sure I'll reiterate this at the end of class, but I'd like to do this publicly. You all have been absolutely amazing. The ethics class is a class that is by and large student driven. I come there, I say some things that may surprise you about poverty, about racism, about sexism, but then you all are the ones that supply the conversation and the ideas that go from there, and you all have been kind and generous towards each other and towards me, and I cannot thank you enough. Truly, from the deepest part of my heart, thank you. So, okay, you have no idea how powerful that makes me feel. All right, so as Mr. Kronk said, I'm going to talk about scholarship, right? One of the privileges I didn't expect to have coming in was hearing all of you talk. All you seniors have your chapel talks, and I learned so much about your experiences here, about your character development, and even about your faith. I think I in particular remember Rowena talking about her faith as a formative role in her life. One of the things that didn't get talked about as much, though it did get mentioned here and there, is scholarship. And scholarship has played an enormous role in my life. And I think it's right that scholarship in our motto is put between character and faith, because I think scholarship is the glue that holds it all together. I think fundamentally scholarship is about understanding and being understood. And as high schoolers, I'm sure some of your most memorable experiences here will be when you are failed to be understood by other people. There's nothing you want more than other people to look at you and understand you and be in friendship with you. My contention is, in society and interpersonally, scholarship is the best way we can do that. So I'll start with a story of when I was misunderstood in a rather embarrassing way. So I had a very different high school experience than most of you. When I started college, I went in kind of skeptical about all of it, and I didn't live on campus. I drove back and forth from LaPorte to Bethel and Mishawaka. And the car that I drove was previously totaled, right? My grandma had been driving in Mishawaka. It was my grandma's car, and somebody beside her had hit a sign, one of those blinking arrow signs, and it flipped up and smashed down the top of her car. Well, when I started college, I needed a car. I'd recently been nudged from the nest, so to speak, and incorporated back into the house when I decided to go to college, but I needed a car to get back and forth from Bethel to home. And so I saw that my grandma had this car that was sitting in the yard. There had been holes gashed in the roof of it, and it was collecting water and dirt and all those types of things. And I decided, okay, that car the engine still runs, so I'll get that one going. I got it going. I took tar. I tarred the roof of the car. The muffler was ripped off, right? It was, by all accounts, a beater car. But it was the only car that I had. So I was on my way, I was at Bethel. I had finished up the classes for the day, and I decided to head home. Now, luckily, as per I was used to, I would sleep in my car sometimes because I didn't have enough gas money to come back and forth all the time. So I had blankets and pillows and things like that in the car. But in this particular night, I had intended to go home. I had started up the car. I was driving down the main street in Bethel, and it stalled. And so I coasted into the nearest parking lot and stopped there. I got out, I checked the engine, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I tried turning it over again and again and again. Nothing would fire up. So I pulled out my blankets and my pillows, and I decided to sleep there for the night. Well, this is not the most opportune parking lot to be stopped in. So at about 2 o'clock in the morning, the security guard showed up and came knocking on my window. And from his perspective, what he saw was a steamy windowed car in the girls' freshman parking lot with hand marks all up against the windows. And I'm sure from his perspective, I looked like a Bethel Casanova coming to seduce the virgins of Schult dorm. This was, of course, not the truth. But he knocked on the window all the same. He scolded me, looked somewhat surprised I didn't have somebody else in the car with me, and said, all right, so what are you doing here? I told him, listen, my car broke down. This is not an unusual thing for me. And he said, well, really, why don't you try starting your car? And my idea was, okay, good. This security guard who's harassing me as I'm uncomfortably sleeping in the girls' freshman parking lot is about to be shown that I'm honest and not lying about trying to seduce people in the parking lot. So I turned the car over, and it fires right up, like there was nothing wrong with it. So he tells me, get off campus, and he doesn't want to see me there again. Right? He didn't believe that I was a student. So I drove off campus, went to the Kmart parking lot, and slept the rest of the night there. I was misunderstood, right? He didn't know why I was there. He had the wrong interpretation of what was happening. And this is something that plays through all of our lives. I have not only been misunderstood, but I have misunderstood. I come from a particular background, and part of that background entailed embracing an assumed worldview about the way things work and what people do and why they do it. I had an evangelical fundamentalist outlook. I was staunchly conservative and culturally suspicious. Now, I don't mention these worldviews as a way of demeaning them. I mention them simply to say that these are the worldviews that I held, and I could not see any other way of viewing the world. This culturally suspicious attitude oftentimes led me to believe that other people were insincere, or greedy, or selfish, or self-absorbed in some way. And so my perspective of the outside world as a homeschooled student was that most of you are sinners on the road to perdition, right? That is, you're hellbound. And this created a dismissive attitude towards almost all other views of faith, including other Christian views of faith. Right? If you were a Catholic, you were beholden to a dogma that I found entirely unacceptable and entirely foreign. If you were liberal, then you were soft-hearted and stupid. Right? My mom would say, as growing up, if you're young and conservative, you're heartless. If you're old and liberal, you're brainless. People in general, I just held in such deep disregard and suspicion. I didn't believe that the world had anything to offer me. When I went to college, most of this changed, and I'll give you a little bit of information about me going into college. So as I mentioned, I was homeschooled, and I was very conservative and suspicious, but there were other things going on in my life as well. My parents believed heterodox views, right? And this caused a lot of contention in my family relationship and in my friends' relationship and within the homeschool group that I was a part of. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of homeschoolers actually do know other people besides their own brothers and sisters. We know at least 5 other people. So my parents holding heterodox views led to us being excluded from the homeschool group that I had grown up in, and all my close friends were in that homeschool group. Beyond that, members of the homeschool group went and talked to pastors at the church that we were attending at the time and told them about my parents' views, and we were kicked out of our church. I would have conversations with people that I loved and that I knew loved me, and I would talk about my parents and their views, and they would tell me with sincere love, but they would tell me all the same with tears in their eyes that your parents are going to hell, right? There's no hope for them unless they repent of their rebellious views. That is, their views were not a matter of ignorance, not a matter of misinterpretation, but a matter of willfully sinning against the obvious truth that's revealed to us. So when I went to college, I was thoroughly confused, but still convictedly opinionated. Those of you that have me in ethics course, perhaps you can read through my lines of asking questions and see that I actually hold a lot of views very strongly, and perhaps obviously sometimes. And what I found at Bethel shocked me. I came in expecting to one-up professors that were going to talk about the Christian worldview. I actually originally went in as a sports management major, but you have to take classes in the Christian worldview and theology. I originally wanted to go into sports management because I wanted to be a football coach, because I had so much fun playing football at a little school in LaPorte called Lumiere. I played my high school senior year here. So I came in, I took one sports management class and hated it, absolutely hated it. And I was taking this Exploring the Christian Faith class, which was taught by a professor of mine named Chad Meiser. He's a philosopher, and I loved it. I'd always been one that was interested in conversation. I was always one eager to learn and understand other people's perspectives, even if for the purposes of condemning them and showing them the folly of their ways. But what I met in my professor that was teaching Exploring the Christian Faith was something completely different than I had ever experienced before. He was an extremely kind person. It was, for lack of a better term, highly invigorating and refreshing to meet this person. I'd been used to engaging in topics that are of great importance, religion and politics and ethics, in a certain plane where the goal is to defend orthodoxy. That is, to show the truth that you know for certain, and all others are evil and intentionally rebelling against the truth. But what I experienced at Bethel was somebody that would kindly listen to me, charitably interpret me, and wisely guide me. Right? So I'll give you one of my more extreme views growing up. I held that any book with magic in it, regardless of the nature of that book or the genre of that book, was evil. So I read Harry Potter 1 through 6, loved it, best book series ever. Became thoroughly convinced that it was of the devil, and literally burned my Harry Potter books. As a 16-year-old, I held a book burning in my backyard. So I was explaining to my professors this view about magic in books and about the demonic influence. And again, my position is not to demean this, but to illustrate a way of engaging with ideas. And they did not dismiss me out of hand. They did not look at me as though I was stupid. And they listened to me in the most charitable way possible, and it absolutely changed my life. It changed the way that I interacted with people. It changed the way that I viewed people. And while my beliefs have changed over time, the fundamental difference between me and me 10 years ago in high school is the way that I engage people and the way that I think society ought to engage with each other. They had a dispassionate and reasoned approach. That is, they didn't just say, that's stupid, or you're wrong, or why are you rebelling against the obvious truth of what God wants you to do. They had reasons for what they believed in. They didn't get emotively heated up, right? They interpreted and listened kindly, and then they would say, have you thought about it this way? I see where you're coming from. This is what I hear you saying. Have you thought about it this way? And they did so on any number of important ideas, right? Religion, politics, and ethics, the interests that still occupy my time today. My trajectory in life is shaped by that. I hope as a teacher, both for people that are in my class and outside of my class, that you feel as though you can come up to me and talk to me about these things, about things regarding your religion or regarding political views or ethics. And I don't hope to tell you what to believe. I simply hope to tell you different ways of viewing it and encouraging you to reason about it critically. Don't assume the truth of your views. But here's the thing. This could not happen. The caring that I experienced could not happen except for the scholarship of the people that I was engaging with. That is, they knew what they were talking about. They had something to say. They cared about knowing the truth. Philosophy means the love of wisdom, and I find there to be no higher calling for me as an individual than to pursue wisdom. Because wisdom is the glue that allows people to communicate, to understand. Scholarship is more than an isolated set of acts that we do when we need to turn in a research paper. Scholarship is a necessity for caring for those around us. Let me be clear. Our interpersonal, as well as our political and social lives, depend upon critical engagement and understanding the world around us. Scholarship is a way of being. If you find that too cumbersome, we all ought to be scholars. And I don't mean that you have to go on and study esoteric beliefs about long-dead philosophers, or that you have to go in and study the absolute most mysterious dogmas of your religion. I simply mean that to be a scholar in this sense is to care about the truth, is to care about the wisdom that others can bestow upon you. It's the way of being a scholar. It's the way we ought to all engage with each other if we truly want to care and understand each other. Scholarship, understanding, is the nexus in which we care. If you like, I can provide a sports analogy. We are, of course, a powerhouse basketball school. And when one goes in and plays sports, basketball, lacrosse, whatever it may be, you go in with the intent of being a great basketball player. You go in with the intent of helping your team. You go in with the intent of winning games. You go in with the intent to provide good opposition for the team that you're playing against. And you go in with the intent of entertaining dozens, hundreds, thousands, or if you're exceptionally talented, millions of people. You cannot do this unless you understand the way that the game is played. If you pick up the basketball and run down the court without dribbling, you've done your team a disservice. You look like a fool. You've brought down the level of competition. You've failed to entertain those. Well, that might not be true. Without scholarship, that is, understanding the world around us, we fall into misunderstandings. And misunderstandings breeds frustration, polarization, and distrust. Something we see very much in the world today. And in this context, in a context where we don't understand each other, where we don't attempt to learn from each other, where we don't charitably interpret each other, we cannot move beyond the quagmire that we're stuck in. Right? We recently had an election. We're talking about democracy in our class today. I've never seen a more polarized political contest. Now, politics are always polarizing, and strong opinions should be. But what you see instead is not people diving deeply into the issues and understanding the nature of what our government does and how it ought to run. What you see instead is people taking the lazy way out of identifying with a particular political party and saying, I believe all of this, I just check the boxes. That is a handmade worldview that is handed to you, and you take because it's lazy. I do this. I engage in a form of identity politics where I identify as a particular type of voter. But all that does is create separation. All that does is create antagonization. If you're going to be on the one side, you have to characterize yourself as the opposite of the other. Tell me, what is the rationale that holds pro-life but pro-death penalty? What is the philosophy that holds pro-choice but is against the death penalty? Why are those always associated with each other in the political realm? Is it because they rationally go together, or is it because these are the views that have been associated over time with particular parties? I don't mean to talk just about politics. This goes in for every part of our lives. If you want to understand somebody, a boyfriend, girlfriend, right? If you're a son or daughter, wife or husband, father or mother, you have to understand the way the world works and the way the person you're in a relationship works in order to have a fruitful, productive, and healthy relationship. Oftentimes, we fall apart in that regard. We fail to understand what the other person is saying. We fail to take our emotions into check and reason through the things that we're arguing about. It becomes just simply about winning. Scholarship is what holds it all together. I'm using scholarship obviously in a broad way, but that caring attitude towards the facts of the world, towards the truth, towards the way the world really works, is what allows us to be kind towards one another, to understand one another, to move forward, to make progress. So I'll end with this. It's a benediction of sorts. If you care about character, if you care about faith, if you care about each other, if your blood boils when you witness an injustice, if you have hope for the future despite your present fears, then may you kindly listen, charitably interpret, wisely guide, and learn the ancient human practice of scholarship. Thank you.